Most people believe aging is simply about losing energy, that as the years pass, your body just naturally slows down. But what if that's not actually the real problem? What if the issue isn't that you're running out of energy, but that your cells are running on damaged engines? Inside your body right now, there are trillions of tiny power plants. These are your mitochondria, and every second, they're making a decision that directly affects how you feel, how you age, and how long your cells stay functional. They can either burn clean, efficient energy, or they can start leaking stress signals that quietly accelerate aging from the inside out. And here's the part most people are never told. After the age of 40, your body doesn't just slow down. It begins holding on to old, worn-out mitochondria, structures that should have been broken down and recycled years ago. So instead of generating clean energy, these damaged units start producing more waste, more inflammation, and less usable fuel. It's very similar to driving a car with clogged filters, worn-out spark plugs, and a weak battery. You press the gas, but the system can't respond the way it used to. Now here's where it gets counterintuitive. One of the most powerful ways to fix this entire system is not by adding more fuel, but by temporarily removing it. And this is where things start to get interesting. You start to notice it in small, almost dismissible ways at first. You wake up in the morning, and even though you technically slept through the night, you don't feel restored. It's not exhaustion exactly, just this lingering heaviness, like your body didn't fully recharge. By the afternoon, your energy dips again. Not because you pushed yourself too hard, but because your system simply can't sustain consistent output the way it used to. Simple things begin to feel different. Climbing a flight of stairs feels slightly heavier than it should. Your mental clarity fades faster. Focus that once lasted hours now slips away in minutes. If you exercise, recovery takes longer. Muscles stay sore, progress slows, and weight starts creeping up, even though your eating habits haven't really changed. So you adapt. You reach for more caffeine just to get through the day. You feel this strange combination of being wired, but also deeply tired underneath. Your metabolism feels unpredictable. Some days you feel almost normal, and others completely drained for no clear reason. And naturally, most people explain it away. They say, it's just age, or stress, or a busy lifestyle catching up with them. But internally, something much more specific is happening. Your cells are losing their ability to efficiently create energy. And at the same time, they're producing more cellular stress in the process. So it's not just that you have less energy, it's that the energy system itself is becoming inefficient and noisy. And that's what makes it so frustrating, because from the outside, it feels like you're doing everything right, but your body just isn't responding the same way anymore. So the real question becomes, I am Dr. Gunter. In my clinical work, I've seen a very specific pattern repeat itself over and over again. Two patients walk into my office, same age, similar routines on paper. They both try to eat reasonably well. They both stay somewhat active. From the outside, you'd expect similar outcomes. But that's not what happens. One of them feels energized. Their mind is sharp, their body responds well to stress, and they recover quickly, whether it's from exercise, a long workday, or even illness. The other struggles. Fatigue becomes a daily companion. Weight gain seems almost inevitable. Recovery slows down, and even small physical or mental demands feel disproportionately draining. And when you start looking deeper, something very important stands out. It's not just about what they're eating or how often they're exercising. It's about how their bodies are managing energy at the cellular level. The patients who maintain energy as they age aren't necessarily doing more. They're not always working out harder or following stricter diets. What they are doing, often without even realizing it, is allowing their bodies to experience periods of controlled stress. Moments where the system isn't constantly being fed, constantly stimulated, constantly pushed into input mode. Because on the other side, I see patients who are always fueling, eating frequently, snacking to keep energy up, relying on constant external input to maintain output. But in doing so, they never give their cells the signal to reset. And over time, that difference becomes profound, because the real dividing line isn't effort, it's cellular adaptation. And that raises a deeper question most people never stop to ask. So, What's actually causing this drop in energy after 40? Is it just hormones shifting? Is it your metabolism slowing down like everyone says? Or is something more fundamental happening beneath the surface? Because when you really look at it, symptoms like fatigue, weight gain, and brain fog, they're not the root problem. They're signals. They're your body's way of telling you that something inside your cells is no longer operating efficiently. And if you only focus on the symptoms, trying to boost energy with caffeine, cutting calories harder, or pushing through workouts, you end up treating the surface, while the underlying system continues to struggle. Deep inside your body, there are highly coordinated systems working constantly in the background. They regulate how energy is produced, how cellular damage is identified and repaired, and how your body adapts to stress over time. These systems are what determine whether you feel resilient or depleted. And at the center of all of this, quietly influencing everything, is one critical component: your mitochondria. Not just how many you have, but how well they function, how clean they are, and how efficiently they can respond to changing demands. Because once that system starts to decline, everything downstream begins to shift. So to really understand why something like fasting can have such a profound effect, we first need to understand how this system is supposed to work. Mitochondria are essentially tiny power generators inside your cells. Their job is straightforward, but absolutely critical. They take the fuel you get from food and convert it into usable energy, what we call ATP. This is the form of energy your body can actually use to move, think, repair, and function. If that process runs well, you feel it. You have steady energy, clear thinking, and a body that responds the way you expect it to. Now, the easiest way to understand mitochondria is to think of them as engines. A healthy engine burns fuel cleanly and efficiently. It gives you consistent output without much waste. Everything runs smoothly. But a damaged engine behaves very differently. It produces less energy from the same amount of fuel. It creates more waste in the process, things like reactive byproducts that increase cellular stress. And over time, it breaks down even further, becoming less and less reliable. This is exactly what starts happening inside your body as you age. Your mitochondria gradually become less efficient. Small amounts of damage begin to accumulate. And most importantly, older dysfunctional mitochondria don't get cleared out as effectively as they should. So instead of replacing weak engines with new, efficient ones, your body starts holding onto outdated machinery. And that creates a compounding effect. Less energy gets produced, while more stress signals are generated at the same time. But there's another layer to this that's just as important. As you get older, your body also becomes less responsive to beneficial stress, the kind of signals that would normally trigger repair and renewal. In a younger system, brief periods of stress send a clear message: adapt, rebuild, come back stronger. But over time, that signal gets weaker, and the response becomes slower. So now you have a system that's both accumulating damage and losing its ability to fix it efficiently. And this is exactly where fasting introduces something very powerful. When you fast, something very specific begins to happen inside your body. The moment incoming fuel drops, your cells sense it almost immediately. And that shift activates a powerful internal signal, one that most people never think about. The first mechanism is what we call energy stress activation. When your body detects that energy is temporarily low, it switches on a cellular sensor known as AMPK. You can think of AMPK as your internal low fuel warning system, but instead of shutting things down, it does something much smarter. It starts increasing efficiency. Energy production becomes more precise. Repair pathways begin to activate. And wasteful processes, the ones that burn energy without real benefit, start to slow down. So instead of constantly consuming, your body shifts into optimizing. Now, at the same time, another major system begins to change. In a constantly fed state, your body keeps a pathway called mTOR highly active. mTOR is responsible for growth. It tells your cells to build, expand, and store. That sounds good on the surface, but there's a trade-off. When mTOR stays elevated all the time, it actually blocks repair. It's like trying to renovate a house while constantly adding new furniture. You never stop to clean, fix, or organize what's already there. Fasting lowers mTOR activity. And when that happens, your body finally gets the signal to shift priorities from growth to repair. This leads to less cellular clutter and more internal maintenance. Now here's where things get even more interesting. There's a process called mitophagy. This is your body's built-in system for identifying and removing damaged mitochondria, the weak, inefficient engines we talked about earlier. Without mitophagy, those broken units just stay in place. They continue producing less energy and more stress, gradually dragging the entire system down. But fasting directly activates this cleanup process. It allows your body to selectively remove those dysfunctional mitochondria, the ones that are no longer serving you. And once that cleanup begins, something powerful follows. Your body doesn't just remove the old, it starts rebuilding. This is known as mitochondrial biogenesis. New mitochondria are created to replace the ones that were cleared out. But these aren't just replacements, they're upgrades. They're more efficient at producing energy, more resilient under stress, and better adapted to your body's current needs. So when you look at the full picture, the effect is very clear. You're not just increasing energy. You're fundamentally upgrading the entire system that produces it. Cleaner, stronger, and far more efficient. What makes this even more important is that none of these processes happen in isolation. Inside your body, everything is connected through feedback loops, self-reinforcing cycles that either push your system toward decline or toward recovery. When mitochondria become damaged, the first thing that happens is a drop in energy output. Your cells simply can't produce the same amount of ATP efficiently, but that drop in energy doesn't stay neutral. It creates more internal stress signals. And that stress, instead of fixing the problem, often leads to even more mitochondrial dysfunction over time. So you get a downward cycle. Damaged mitochondria, less energy, higher stress, even more damage. And then another loop begins on top of that. When energy is low, your body naturally compensates by reducing movement. You feel less motivated to exercise, less inclined to be active, and even simple daily tasks start to feel heavier. But reduced movement has consequences. Metabolic activity slows down, blood flow decreases, cellular signaling becomes weaker. And over time, this lack of stimulation feeds back into even more dysfunction. So now you have two reinforcing loops working against you at the same time, one at the cellular level and one at the whole body level. But this is exactly where fasting becomes interesting, because it doesn't just add energy into the system. It interrupts the cycle entirely. When you introduce controlled periods of fasting, you trigger cleanup processes that remove damaged mitochondria. At the same time, you improve energy efficiency and reduce baseline cellular stress. That shift breaks the downward momentum, and once the system is no longer stuck in decline, something very different becomes possible. A positive loop starts to emerge. Healthier mitochondria produce more energy. That increase in energy naturally leads to more physical activity and better metabolic output. More movement strengthens cellular signaling. Stronger signaling improves mitochondrial function even further. So instead of spiraling downward, the system begins to reinforce itself in the opposite direction. Better mitochondria, more energy, more activity, stronger cellular signaling, improved aging dynamics. And once this upward cycle starts to stabilize, the entire baseline of how your body feels begins to change. When mitochondrial function begins to improve, the effects don't stay isolated to one area of the body, because mitochondria are not just energy producers. They are the foundation of how every system performs. So when they become more efficient, the changes start to show up across multiple layers of your physiology. First, energy becomes more stable. Instead of the constant highs and crashes, you start to feel a more consistent baseline. You're not relying on external stimulation just to function through the day. Your body is producing usable energy more reliably, minute by minute. Then there's the brain. The brain is one of the most energy-demanding organs in the body, and it's extremely sensitive to mitochondrial efficiency. When energy production improves, mental clarity follows. Focus feels smoother, thinking becomes less effortful. That constant mental fog begins to lift. Metabolism also shifts. When mitochondria are functioning well, your body becomes more flexible in how it uses fuel. Fat burning becomes easier because your system is no longer stuck in inefficient energy processing patterns. Instead of struggling to extract energy, it begins to do it more effectively and consistently. At the same time, inflammation starts to decrease. Damaged mitochondria tend to produce more cellular stress signals, which contribute to low-grade inflammation throughout the body. When those damaged units are removed and replaced with healthier ones, that internal stress load naturally begins to drop. And perhaps most importantly, the aging process itself begins to slow at the cellular level. Not because time changes, but because the rate of internal damage accumulation is reduced, while repair capacity improves. So what you're really seeing here isn't just an energy upgrade, it's a full system recalibration, because mitochondria don't just influence how energetic you feel, they influence how efficiently every major system in your body operates. And that's why this goes far beyond fatigue or metabolism. It's about how your entire body functions as an integrated system. In modern life, there's a subtle but powerful problem that most people don't recognize. It's not just that we're eating bad food or not exercising enough, it's that the entire environment is constantly sending the wrong biological signals to our cells. One of the biggest drivers is constant eating. From morning to night, food is rarely absent. Snacks, drinks, small bites, there's almost no true gap where the body is allowed to shift out of fuel incoming mode. And biologically, that matters more than most people realize, because when nutrients are always present, the body stays locked in a storage and growth state. It never fully transitions into repair. Then you add a sedentary lifestyle on top of that. Movement is one of the strongest signals your mitochondria respond to. Without it, energy demand stays low, circulation weakens, and cellular signaling becomes less dynamic. Over time, the system adapts downward. Ultra-processed foods make this even worse. They deliver energy in a way that is fast but biologically shallow. High input, low-quality signaling. Your cells receive calories, but not the same depth of metabolic activation that comes from real, nutrient-dense food. Sleep disruption compounds everything. When sleep is poor, mitochondrial repair processes are interrupted. Hormonal balance shifts. Stress hormones remain elevated longer than they should. The body never fully resets. And chronic stress keeps the entire system in a constant state of alert. When you put all of this together, the effect becomes very clear. These modern conditions actively block some of the most important biological repair mechanisms in your body. AMPK activation becomes suppressed because there's never a true energy dip. Mitophagy slows down because the system is never pushed into cleanup mode. Metabolic flexibility declines because the body stops switching efficiently between fuel states. And the result is not immediate collapse, but gradual stagnation. Your body stops receiving the clear signal that it's safe to repair, rebuild, and recycle damaged components. So instead, it stays stuck in a constant maintenance of dysfunction state, managing inputs, but never truly resetting the system underneath. And this is exactly why the timing of fasting becomes so important. Now, the important question becomes, how do you actually begin to shift this system in a practical way? Because understanding mitochondria is useful. But what truly matters is how you apply it in real life, in a way that your body can actually adapt to. The first and most foundational approach is intermittent fasting, typically in the 16 to 18-hour range. This doesn't mean jumping into extreme restriction. In fact, that's where most people go wrong. The key here is gradual adaptation. Your body responds far better to consistency than intensity. When you create a predictable fasting window each day, you begin to gently train your cells to function efficiently in lower energy states. Over time, this is what encourages AMPK activation and improves mitochondrial efficiency. The second layer is occasional extended fasting, around 24 hours. This is not something to do frequently. Instead, it acts as a deeper cellular reset when used sparingly. In this longer fasting window, the body has more time to engage cleanup processes like mitophagy, allowing it to clear out more of the accumulated dysfunctional mitochondria. Think of it as a periodic system, deep maintenance mode, not a daily habit. But fasting alone is not enough. The third component is nutrient-dense eating. Once you do eat, the quality of that input matters significantly. Whole foods, adequate protein, and micronutrients provide the raw materials your body needs to rebuild and maintain new mitochondrial structures. Without this, you're only triggering cleanup without proper reconstruction. Then comes movement, often underestimated but absolutely critical. Light daily movement like walking, combined with some form of resistance training, sends a direct signal to your mitochondria that energy demand is present. This improves mitochondrial signaling and reinforces the adaptations you're trying to build through fasting. And finally, hydration. Water is not just about thirst, it supports every cellular process we've discussed, from energy production to waste removal. Even mild dehydration can reduce efficiency at the cellular level, making all other interventions less effective. When you combine these 5 elements, you're not relying on a single intervention. You're creating a system-wide environment that supports mitochondrial renewal, energy efficiency, and metabolic flexibility. Even though these mechanisms are powerful, there's an important reality that often gets overlooked. Most people don't fail because fasting or lifestyle changes don't work. They fail because of how they apply them. One of the most common mistakes is fasting too aggressively right from the start. Instead of allowing the body to adapt gradually, they jump into long fasting windows too quickly. And when the system is already under stress, this can backfire, leading to fatigue, irritability, poor recovery, and eventually burnout. The body doesn't respond to force. It responds to adaptation. Another major issue is what happens during the eating window. Fasting can only take you so far if the food quality doesn't support recovery. If the diet is heavily processed, low in nutrients, and high in inflammatory load, then you're constantly triggering damage while trying to repair it. That creates a confusing signal for the body. Repair is activated, but rebuilding materials are insufficient. Sleep is another critical factor that is often ignored. People underestimate how deeply sleep controls mitochondrial repair. If sleep is inconsistent or low quality, the body never fully completes its nightly restoration cycles. So even if fasting is done correctly, the system remains partially depleted. Then there's overtraining. Exercise is beneficial, but too much intensity without recovery adds another layer of stress. Instead of improving mitochondrial efficiency, it can push the system further into fatigue, especially if nutrition and sleep are already compromised. And finally, perhaps the most overlooked mistake of all, expecting instant results. Mitochondrial adaptation is not immediate. It is structural. You are literally influencing how your cells produce and manage energy. That takes time. When people expect rapid transformation and don't see it, they assume the approach isn't working and abandon it too early. But in reality, the body is often responding, just on a slower biological timeline. So the key is not intensity, it's alignment. When fasting, nutrition, sleep, and activity are balanced together, the system begins to shift in a stable and sustainable way. But when even one of those elements is out of sync, the entire process becomes significantly less effective. And once that environment is consistent, the body begins to respond in a very predictable way. Here's a key point most people underestimate. Your body doesn't transform overnight. Biological systems don't respond like switches. They respond like gradual recalibration processes. So when you begin applying fasting and mitochondrial support strategies, the changes tend to follow a very predictable timeline. In the first 1 to 2 weeks, the most noticeable shift is hunger adaptation. Your body is essentially learning a new rhythm. The initial discomfort, those strong hunger signals, the habitual urge to eat, starts to stabilize. It's not that hunger disappears, but it becomes more structured and less emotionally driven. Your system is beginning to recognize that energy availability is no longer constant, and it starts adjusting hormone signaling accordingly. By weeks 3 to 4, something more interesting begins to happen. Energy stabilization starts to emerge. Instead of sharp spikes and crashes throughout the day, your energy begins to feel more even. You may still have fluctuations, but the baseline becomes noticeably more steady. This is often the first point where people realize something is genuinely changing at a physiological level, not just behavioral adjustment. Between 1 to 2 months, a deeper shift develops, metabolic flexibility. This is where your body becomes more efficient at switching between fuel sources. Instead of relying heavily on constant glucose availability, it starts becoming more comfortable tapping into stored energy when needed. This flexibility is closely tied to improved mitochondrial function and reduced metabolic rigidity. After around 3 months and beyond, the changes become more structural. You begin to notice improved resilience, not just in energy levels, but in how your body handles stress, recovery, and daily demands. Workouts feel more sustainable, mental fatigue reduces, and your system becomes more adaptive overall. And importantly, these changes are cumulative. Each phase builds on the previous one. Nothing happens in isolation, which is why consistency matters far more than intensity. because what you're really doing isn't chasing short-term energy changes. You're gradually rewiring how your cells manage and produce energy over time. One of the most important things to understand is this: your body is not broken. Even after 40, even after years of fatigue, stress, or inconsistent habits, your biological systems are still fundamentally designed to adapt. That capacity hasn't disappeared. What changes over time is not the presence of repair systems, but how strongly they are being activated. Inside you, the same core mechanisms that built your energy in your younger years are still there. Your cells still carry the instructions for repair. Your mitochondria still have the ability to become more efficient. Your body still knows how to clear damaged components and rebuild stronger ones. The difference is signal strength. Modern patterns, constant eating, low movement, chronic stress, poor sleep don't shut these systems off completely. Instead, they quiet the signals that normally trigger them. So it can start to feel like your body is resisting change, when in reality, it's simply not receiving the right conditions to switch into repair mode. And this is where the perspective shift becomes powerful, because once you understand that these systems are still active, just understimulated, the entire approach changes. You're no longer trying to fix a broken system. You're learning how to reactivate one that already exists. That means even small, consistent changes, like structured fasting windows, better sleep, light movement, and improved nutrition, can create meaningful shifts over time. Not because you're forcing your body to do something unnatural, but because you're restoring the conditions it was designed to respond to. And that's the real source of biological hope here. Your system is still capable. It just needs the right signals again. When you step back and look at it more deeply, fasting is often misunderstood. Most people interpret it through the lens of restriction, something you're not allowed to do, or a form of deprivation where you're simply withholding food. But biologically, that's not what's happening. At a cellular level, fasting is not about absence. It's about communication. Your body is constantly interpreting signals. Every pattern, when you eat, how often you eat, how you move, how you sleep, is being read as information. And fasting is one of the clearest signals you can give your biology. Because when food intake temporarily decreases, your cells don't interpret it as punishment. They interpret it as a shift in environmental conditions. A signal that says resources are not constantly available, so efficiency matters now. And in response, your body begins to adjust. It starts prioritizing repair over growth. It activates internal cleanup processes. It becomes more selective about how energy is used. So instead of thinking of fasting as taking something away, it's more accurate to see it as sending a directive, a biological instruction that tells your system, upgrade, repair, become more efficient. This is a fundamentally different way of looking at it, because once you shift from the idea of deprivation to the idea of communication, fasting is no longer something you endure. It becomes something you use intentionally, a tool for signaling adaptation. And the deeper insight is this: your body is always listening. The question is not whether it responds. The question is what message it's being given most often. And when that message becomes consistent and structured, your biology doesn't just react. It reorganizes itself around it. If this changed the way you think about energy, aging, and what's actually happening inside your body, then you're already starting to see the bigger picture. Because once you understand mitochondria, you stop seeing fatigue as something random and start recognizing it as a signal that can be influenced, improved, and even reversed through the right biological inputs. And that shift alone is powerful. If you want to go deeper into this kind of science, where we connect fasting, cellular repair, metabolism, and real-world longevity in a simple, practical way, then stay connected and make sure you're part of this ongoing series. There's still a lot more to uncover. Because here's something even more interesting. Fasting alone can trigger mitochondrial repair and cleanup. But when you combine it with the right type of exercise, something even more powerful happens at the cellular level. You don't just maintain your mitochondria.